Welcome to the Divorce Podcast, a podcast that aims to address divorce, separation and co-parenting here in the UK, countering the often sensationalist way it's portrayed in the media, challenging the status quo and driving for reform. On each episode, I'm joined by experts to discuss divorce, separation and co-parenting from different angles and to give their opinions and to debate them. I'm Kate Daly, a relationship counsellor and divorce coach, co-founder of Amicable, the divorce services company, and host of the Divorce Podcast. In this episode, I was joined by Jen Gallagher, a co-parenting coach and a former therapist with a child development background. Jen's based in Florida, and she's got a thriving co-parenting coaching practice, supporting divorced and uncoupled parents transitioning to become co-parents. She specialises in children from babies through to the age of 8 years old and shares her wonderful tips and advice on Instagram. Jen's a co-parent herself, and what makes her tips so digestible is that they're practical and based on her own experience of what works and what doesn't. I love Jen's tips about reframing common co-parenting issues so that everyone's a winner. Reframing how you present a creative solution can shift what your partner might consider as controlling behaviour to something that can benefit everyone involved. Jen also shared her tips around having a routine that's meaningful to your child rather than seeing things through an adult lens. The big takeaway from this podcast that will stay with me is that you don't need to be on the same page to be a good co-parent. Wow, what a relief. And you just need to be in the same book. I loved meeting Jen, and we'll be inviting her back for another session, so I hope you enjoy this episode. If you really loved this episode or want to hear more episodes like this, then please make sure to rate us on your preferred listening platform. Enjoy the episode. Welcome, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much, Kate, for having me.
Thanks for being here. I'm really looking forward to this. I was just saying to you before, wasn't I, that it's really great when we have people who with lots of tips and advice for parents who are going through this perhaps for the first time. So excited to hear all the tips. But just before we get on to the tips, wonder if you'll just give us a little bit about your background and explain, this transition from therapist into, a co-parenting coach and just how that came about.
Okay, well, before I had my son is now 6 years old. And prior to my son kind of coming into this world, I had gone to school for social work and then graduate school for clinical social work. So I'd been practicing in the field, working with one-on-one clients, doing group work, primarily with young adults, also adolescents, and then a fair group with children who experience severe trauma. So it's kind of across the gamut, but really working with children and families. So when I got pregnant, I wasn't sure if I was going to go back or not when I went on maternity leave. And it really kind of hit me because my co-parenting journey started from birth. So my son's dad and I had separated when I was pregnant, or just when I found out I was pregnant. And so it started out from the get-go. So kind of navigating that whole type of how are we going to create this kind of harmonious life for our son between these two worlds. And then also that I was the primary caretaker at the time. It was just so much to think about to jump back into going back to seeing clients because emotionally, I didn't have the bandwidth to give myself to them. I just had the capacity for myself and our son.
Well,
and
just
that
keep
whole
yourself
situation.
upright at that point, I would imagine. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's pretty much why I transitioned, and it worked out through like a mutual agreement that I would stay home and be the primary caregiver for our son up until he went to preschool. So I'd been really outside of the kind of clinical world and, therapy, mental health world. And something that I found I really struggled with in my own journey, becoming a single parent and the co-parenting journey, was that I couldn't find information that really spoke to the message that I wanted to hear that aligned with the education that I knew about child development for young children. So in separating homes with young children, a lot of the stuff was just geared towards older children and like, I don't know, navigating like soccer practice or like cell phone privileges and things like that. When it's like, how do you work out potty training in two homes? You know, how do you navigate the food challenges when you're introducing new foods to your
Weaning
infant?
and
Or just introducing new foods for allergic reactions. It's like, how do you get on the same page with your child's other parent when maybe they don't look into those details as you do, but you want to be on the same page? And how could you work, you know, in harmony together without that conflict of sometimes that just the weight of co-parenting brings on parenting in general. So I wanted to know all this information. I couldn't find it. So I pretty much put together kind of trial and error the things from my own experience and working with, you know, clients and, you know, kind of communication techniques that I've done with kind of conflict resolution. And it's like, ooh, how can I apply that to my own situation? So I really kind of just put everything together myself and found that this may be of service to other parents with young children who are going through this, and especially who are in this more of a paradigm shift of parenting, more in a conscious, gentle parenting way versus like an authoritarian way. And I knew that there was a calling for that in the industry and the field. So that's why I decided to start Single Parenting Solutions, which is my coaching company. And I love that I'm able to have a platform on social media to kind of promote those tips and support on that, you know, global free platform, as well as work individually with clients. So that's pretty much how it kind of came about.
And it sounds like your popularity is, you know, in large part because it's not just book smart stuff. You are walking the talk. You've walked this route and you've experimented. I thought it was really interesting what you're saying, that, you know, I try and apply it into my life and look at the things that have worked and haven't worked for me. It's just so important, isn't it? Because otherwise it comes across as preaching to people when we're all just trying to do our best and muddle through. But I think that sense, I wonder if that sense that you've been here, you've done it, you've tried it, some stuff's worked, some stuff hasn't. I think that probably feeds into your popularity and why so many people, you know, turn to you to look for these tips because they're so practical.
Well, I love hearing that when I do hear that from followers and clients and stuff like that. So I do find that huge.
Let's start at the beginning then. So this is going to be a bit of a deep dive into younger children, as you said. What are the first kind of things you either need to get onto the same page with, or talk us through? So from birth upwards, so what are the things you're thinking about when children are very, you know, just born or even prior to them being born? Is it possible, for example, to have a conversation with a parent to be, or do you have to effectively be a parent before you can even really contemplate this stuff? Can you plan? I'm a planner, Jen. I'm a planner.
The idea of being on the same page all the time is something that we really need to kind of put aside, you know, this kind of same page idea, and more think about how we can create a life for, you know, children or your child that's like works coexisting and in harmony versus that like in the same page. Because I know a lot of times a lot of professionals promote like you have to be on the same page with discipline. You have to, you know, the same rules in each house. And if we think about that from a practical standpoint, that's just not the reality. You know, it's not the reality because every different household like has different lifestyle. And then you think about blended families. So then you're creating more people in that home. So there's so much nuances to, I guess, the family dynamic and the family unit, and then all the subunits that when it comes into like co-parenting and then, you know, blended families, that having this idea of, oh, you have to be on the same page to be good co-parents, like this good idea, or, you know, to be enough for that idea. And it's not necessarily true.
I love that you say that, because immediately I kind of feel a bit of relief, because it's so hard, isn't it? If you're trying to do, oh, we've all got to be the same, and trying to get your ex, who perhaps hates you at this point, to do anything that you think is a good idea is just a nightmare. So just that whole thing of, okay, I can drop that huge high pedestal that I'm going to put my co-parenting plan on that says I've got to be on the same page. I love that you say that. So thank you. That's just a relief to hear it. So yes, sorry, I interrupted. Go on.
Oh, no. So that's the first planning. Anything you want to think about before going forward is that you will not be on the same page. And
that's okay.
Yes. And that's okay. And the ideal is to be in the same book.
Right. Okay.
I don't know where the source came with that kind of quote, but it's always stuck with me that it's like, you don't have to be on the same page, but the goal is to be in the same book. And the same book is bringing that love and nurturing, parent figures and that family unit for your child. And that's the same book, is parenting, not Xing. So all the Xing and which I consider all the things that have to do with maybe the romantic relationship prior, or even things that you would discuss in a lawyer's office. That's really the Xing, because when you put those things into play, then it becomes that hands-on parenting when the child's involved. Like, they're not going to be inside all these different legal, rooms and stuff like that. It's like they're going to be in their home, and you're going to bring these things that you plan into your home. So it's like, how can we get that into more of a parenting framework versus this like legalese and legal structure, and more of a flow, because life is gray. There's so much gray.
It's gray. And also, it's not something you do once. So I always think the difficulty with the co-parenting is people work so hard sometimes to get a plan. And then, a new term comes a few weeks later, literally, and the whole plan can go to pot because swimming now is on a Friday instead of a Wednesday. So this idea that you're doing it once and then somehow you're going to ride off into the sunset with your plan, and you're going to stick to that plan, and you're going to be able to tell your ex that this is what you agreed in the plan, and therefore you've got to go back and do it. That's not co-parenting, is it? That's, like you say, that's the legal Xing stuff. And the co-parenting is this sense of having your child in mind and knowing that all of the arrangements you make are going to get changed at some point.
And that's the thing too. It's like the Xing part and all of those kind of legal stuff. There's a purpose for it, but where does your child fit into that? And it fits into now this different role about being a parent and more that nurturing figure versus being a, documenter, when maybe your child comes home and their toenails aren't cut, or, you know what I mean? Like, you can take off that hat, sometimes, and it's okay, because we're parenting, and parenting is so flawed. There's so many flaws in parenting. So
you start this transitioning journey, and what do you think are the key milestones from the parent's perspective then? What are you transitioning from? How is the relationship changing, do you think?
Well, this is where the kind of like unique dynamic and like specifics to that individual relationship kind of lie. A lot of my work that I do is kind of inspired by the information that I received that was just like, whoa, that's not going to work for everybody. And the thing is too, is that when we talk about like boundaries, and now you're going from one family structure and one type of relationship to now a different type of relationship and different family structure or restructuring, there are going to be different boundaries, but you choose those boundaries of what serves you, and then also what serves the benefit to the relationship. Because that's what boundaries are. The boundaries are not only to protect ourselves, but also that help and nurture the relationship to succeed, So boundaries are important, but boundaries are individual. Boundaries are specific to you. And it really takes a little bit of thought to put together what you see as something is a boundary for you, or something that might just be like a lofty idea.
Okay. So do you have an example from your own, if you don't mind sharing, like from your own transition then? So what was an important boundary for you?
Well, the opposite was I had all this advice about how you shouldn't allow your child's other parent into your home. And the thing with that is that I had an infant. I had an infant, and there was a lot of not just hormones. So there was a lot of just craziness and chaos within my own, mind. And there was a lot of postpartum anxiety going on too about being separated from my child, which is completely like normal, in many different family structures. But so I had this really intense fear about being separated from a very, very early newborn for long periods of time. So how I navigated that was inviting my son's dad into our home, and it was almost like a nesting kind of dynamic where he would spend time with our son and I would either leave the room or give them space or maybe go for a walk. Sometimes I would go grab coffee. So it was their time and nurturing their relationship. However, it almost benefited everybody because it was also like you think about having to drag a diaper bag over back and forth to another home, put a baby in the car and then put him back, because our schedule wasn't overnights until a while. So it really was stress-free on dad to just come and play and, be interactive and then leave when it was time to go. And then it was comforting for me that, our child was in the environment that he knew, and all those things were there too. And it also gave me the chance to, do bath time together and to do those things that first time parents, you're kind of like, oh, is this how the first bath is like, oh, okay. Now I know I can't, this is like the most fragile thing in the world, and so I knew that there was going to be a learning curve. There's such a vulnerability when it comes to parenting and about how someone parents, and that kind of, I'm going to give you a suggestion a lot of times because it's so vulnerable turns into unsolicited advice.
And particularly when the relationship is fragile, and that might be playing into the relationship breakdown and the reasons that that's happened. And yeah, I can see that that's a very tricky space to navigate, isn't it?
So it's all about navigation in that frame because it's two-sided. Like nobody wants to hear unsolicited advice, but then you're also talking about the same child. And there's a lot of, especially when the relationship is very fragile in that coexisting of parents, the jealousy is really tough because that can even happen in a loving marriage, two parent home where it's like, oh, Bobby doesn't want me to put him to bed any night. He hates me. He hates that I put him to bed, all that kind of stuff. And then it almost like becomes on steroids when it's in a co-parenting dynamic. It's like, you do this wrong and you do that wrong. And they don't want me to put them to bed because you're messing up the schedule at the other home.
Yeah.
And
well, I think that's what happens, isn't it? There's an element of blame then attached in addition to the child's natural preferences or moods or whatever. There's then some sort of, this isn't just happening because this is what happens. It's happening because you, the other parent, are doing something to mess with their heads, mess with the schedule, change their minds. And I think that's what comes in, doesn't it? Whereas if you can have these conversations from a child development perspective and see it through the lens of this is normal child behavior, it's not personal. If you can let your own ego take a back seat, that then allows such creative space for doing a brilliant co-parenting job, doesn't it? But whenever we get angry and whenever we engage in that way, it's our egos that are taking over, isn't it, ultimately?
Yeah. And it's when you're in that moment and you're thinking, like, say that bedtime struggle is hard and that they maybe don't have the same structure and routines that you have within your home. You're thinking, oh, they're doing this at the other parent while you have your child in front of you having a hard time. So your dysregulation is going to increase and you're going to become more dysregulated because you're not only frustrated at their other parent, but you're frustrated that they're not complying to what you want and having a very natural power struggle because bedtime
is a power struggle, isn't it? Yeah.
are very natural, but they're very natural power struggles. Like everybody experiences them, But so when you're so far far removed from it, you lose that ability to stay present in the moment and calm yourself down to be able to deal with what's in front of you. You know, it's almost like you removed yourself.
What is the secret? So how do you have those conversations with your ex? So we talked at the beginning, didn't we? You don't need to use language of let's get on the same page. It doesn't have to be. How do you have the conversation about co-parenting? What are the sort of key tenets of a good co-parenting conversation? What should we be thinking about when we first separate in terms of the conversation we need to have with the other parent?
Many of the parents that I work with, their child's other parent, their co-parent, has a different parenting style. So what I like to do is really think, is this going to kind of do like a spot check? Like, is this really going to make a difference if they change something within their home? Is this kind of a subject that's been kind of talked about and you've really tried to get on the same page and it's just not clicking? So it's like, what can you now focus on in your own home and give your child, which you see them maybe having a lack thereof in their other home? Maybe that's like autonomy. What can you give them within your home that nurtures those things that you want them to have versus focusing on dictating the other parent's skills? And then speak to your co-parents' interests and desires. And a lot of times you can get those goals met once you speak to their interests and desires and reframing things where they win and then ultimately the child wins and you win.
Yes. So that's a really good point, isn't it? Because sometimes we're so busy pushing our own agenda, we forget to feel what it's like to receive that information that we're giving, don't we? So if you put yourself in their shoes and think about how is this going to land, it's hard though, isn't it? Because I mean, how do you do that? What could be the other parent's interests that you would want to be tapping into?
So I could just give like a little kind of, this is not something major, but it's something like just a little minor. And it was about shoe tying in our home. And it was like my son he's very large feet. So the elastic shoes, he's outgrown them completely. He was 4, so he wasn't at the time frame when they're starting to tie their shoes or practicing tying their shoes. Well, Dad was having a problem with him getting out of the house fast enough and was like, he doesn't put on his shoes enough time and he's not listening. He's not listening. Well, I saw the problem that was happening in our home. And it's not that he's listening. He's just having challenging when he's giving all this responsibilities and independence. So he kept on buying him shoelaces. And it's like, well, he can't tie his shoes, so you're going to have to tie them. So you're creating more of this stress during this time of getting out the door. So what I did is I said, hey, I have these shoelaces. And these are fantastic shoelaces. I bought a pack of 10. I'm going to give them to you. They are a game changer. He can slip them on. He knows how to do it and they can help you get out the door. And you don't even have to worry about tying his shoes. So it's really saying like, you don't have to worry about tying his shoes and you don't have to stress are those like key factors on getting the goal met and our child being able to like not having to be yelled at all the time for not listening when he's in a space where is above his.
Yeah, that's the
physical.
Reframe, isn't it? It's that the reframe is you don't have to stress rather than don't shout at him, don't do this, don't do that. When you do this, he feels that it's removing that, isn't it? And it's saying what the outcome could be, which is you don't have the stress of leaving the house. Yeah.
Because I know it's painful. I know it's painful having to do that. And if I was thinking about tying his shoes and triple knotting it 3 times or all that kind of stuff, it would drive me crazy too. So it's like, hey, you don't have to worry about this anymore. You don't have to worry about it. I got a solution and here you can have it because I bought a pack of 10. I didn't have to go out of my way.
Yeah, exactly. I'm really super conscious of time and we are rapidly running out of time, but what about some top tips then? I know you sort of think, oh gosh, where do I start? But there's handovers, there's, all sorts of things that go on in a co-parenting kind of life. What are your top tips? I love the one about reframing. That's a great one. I love the one about not feeling you've got to be on the same page. Are there any other kind of really, neat tricks to think about or tips to think about, when you're co-parenting?
So I have 2 that are very effective for lots of different things. One has to do with scheduling. So when you think about creating a plan and you think about creating a schedule for young kids, when we talk about kids thrive on routines and structures, a lot of times we think that it's like the same thing, but through the lens of a grown-up. Now, when we think about school and early child development and going to school, they have, Monday and I think through Saturday, or different parts of the country. It's like, we
have
the
Monday
weekdays.
to Friday. Yeah.
Oh,
Thankfully.
Monday to Friday.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
I know, I think it's Italy has Saturday. So you have like the days of the week and then you have the weekend. So it's like they know those days, but they don't know the every other Wednesday kind of schedule where if you have like 2 days on, 2 days off every third Wednesday of the month. To them, that's not structure. Even if you're doing it religiously for 6 months, they don't understand that concept. So I feel for young children, at least maybe for a beginning time being, is having the set days of the week to be consistent. So they know where they're going to be every Monday, every Tuesday, every of those days of the week versus this kind of wonky kind of schedule. And then so that also the parents get a time where they can schedule things when your child is not with you for things that are ongoing weekly that other times you wouldn't be able to schedule if you had like a wonky kind of schedule. Next tip is to have 2 attachment toys at different homes. So a lot of times a child will have like a blanket or a stuffy or something like that. If your child's young enough, you're able to get 2 and to create that smell, create that sense of safety and everything, that they don't have to bring that same one back and forth, because the grown-ups, we're responsible for that stuffy. It's not the kid. We are. And if that kid doesn't get that stuffy at night, you know that there's going to be a problem, So having 2 different attachment toys at 2 different homes, and you could even use the same detergent as the other parent. I mean, that's what we did. In our home, I changed my detergent to Dad's detergent when I got him the other stuffed animal, so that our son can have the exact same sensory needs at night at both homes. He listens to the same music at both homes. He has night books that are next to his bed at each house, that if he wants to look at photos of him and his dad at my house or photos of him and me at his dad's house, he has them to like look through and say goodnight to. So a lot of those consistencies can happen. And I've found that even the getting a stuffed animal for the other home that's the same as yours, a lot of times people will say, oh, well, my co-parent won't buy one. And it's like, well, how can you reframe that it can be well received? They don't have to buy it. Can you gift it? Is this going to be like this may really help him sleep, well at night. And then, so you won't have to wake up and, so it's like, how can you frame this to meet the end goal so that everybody wins?
The trick is, isn't it? It's trying to do things for your child that doesn't leave you open to the kind of criticism that you're being controlling. So it, like you say, it's how you work with the other parent, so that you're always thinking about the outcome for your child, not directing the other parent to do the same as you do, because that's when things become harder and fall down. If you put it in the mindset of the child, and if you have to do more or you have to do it differently, that's fine. I think that's the thing, isn't it? That the best outcome doesn't mean you both doing the same thing or having to be, as you said at the very beginning, which I love this, you don't have to be on the same page. That's the thing. When you think of it as the book rather than the page, it just opens up creative possibilities for a good outcome for your kid.
Yeah. And you got to know yourself too. Cause if, I know that I expect a lot and ask for a lot about, my child. So I have to know when I have to kind of calm down and settle down and be like, you know what? That is completely fine. And I don't even have to go there. I don't even have to say anything, where it's like, okay, you do you. And that's like, I don't even have to comment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about, I think some of the times it's about good enough rather than everybody having to be 5-star, but good enough.
Yes.
Is good.
Yes. Yes. I remind myself that all the time.
Yeah, that's my mantra. Good enough's okay. Look, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. I feel like we're definitely going to have you back because I've got so many questions that we didn't get to answer. We've run out of time. So I'm definitely going to ask you to come back and do some more tips. There's loads of stuff like handovers, transitions, how you live together before you divorce, all of that kind of stuff, different parenting styles. You very briefly mentioned conscious parenting. I really would like to know more about that as well. So I hope you will come back, Jen. But for now, thank you very much. Just tell us, remind people, where can people find you?
Well, social media wise, I am pretty much on Instagram daily. So my handle is Single Parenting Solutions on Instagram. And then also my website is www.singleparentingsolutions.com. And you can also email me at jen@singleparentingsolutions.com.
Brilliant. Jen, thank you. And of course, you can find me. I'm on Twitter. I'm at Kate_Daly. You can hear about new podcast episodes on Twitter by following at divorce_podcast. And if you like this podcast episode, want to listen to more, then please subscribe for updates by visiting thedivorcepodcast.com. Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me. And thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you.